Hi, I'm Josh Rushing. I'm filling in for Lisa Fletcher, and you are in the stream. Everyone wants a smartphone, but it turns out that dumb phones are smarter than you may think. Is this a low-tech revolution? Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here looking out for your live feedback. Malika, what's the community saying about this one today?
Well, they're chiming in from all around the world, and they're telling us how this technology has affected their lives where they are. Rihanna tweets, I live in Zambia, where mobile money was introduced last year. The lower classes cannot afford bank accounts, so it's the next best thing. Now, whether you're in Zambia, Kenya, India, or anywhere else in the world, we want you to join the conversation by using the hashtag AJStream.
In our studios, Kentaro Toyama with the School of Information at UC Berkeley. He spent his career researching electronic technology in the developing world. Kentaro, welcome to the stream.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great. Today we also have a Google Plus Hangout where a few others are waiting to give us their perspective on this topic. You too can join the stream. You can jump in on future Hangouts by going to the link below and adding us to your circles.
Hi, my name is Samantha Wessels. I'm an education major from Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm in the stream.
A low-tech revolution may be underway. It started in Kenya, where a mobile phone operator, Safaricom, launched a groundbreaking payment system called M-Pesa. The M stands for mobile, and Pesa is Swahili for money. M-Pesa allows Kenyans to add up to over $1,000 to their mobile account, protected by Kenyan banks. If someone wants to send money to a friend, pay their child's school fees, or buy a loaf of bread, they can do it all through their mobile phone. These transactions are so popular it accounts for roughly 20% of Kenya's GDP. The growth of M-Pesa in users has been staggering. Just say 5 years ago, in 2007, you can see on this chart on my computer, they had less than 20,000 users. 5 years later, in 2012, over 15 million Kenyans alone. Now, some of that growth may come because M-Pesa is considered user-friendly and has made life easier for Kenyans to send and receive money. Here's a promotional video by Safaricom that explains how M-Pesa helped one rural farmer.
150 kilometers away from Nairobi is a village called Gakindu in Nyeri district, and here we find Jane Jerry, another person celebrating M-Pesa. Since she discovered M-Pesa, Jane is able to pay her son's school fees from the confines of her farm.
Using my phone, I selected the M-Pesa option, then followed the instructions. I entered the head teacher's number and sent him 2,000 Kenya shillings. This makes me happy as I can conveniently pay my son's school fees by simply sending it via M-Pesa.
That looks beautiful there. All right, well, here to discuss whether this is the start of a low-tech revolution is Umar Saif. He joins us live via Lahore, Pakistan. He's a professor at Lahore University who looks at tech solutions for the developing world. Umar, welcome to the show. But let's first go to our Google Hangout, where Mike Elgin joins us from Kenya. Mike, you wrote an article about your first impressions of M-Pesa on, I think, Computer World. I read it. It got me interested in this subject. And I was also interested how a techie like yourself ended up in Kenya in the first place. So tell us about that.
Well, I am a freelance writer. I've been doing it for many years, and I'd been working from home. And at some point, I realized that the mobile technology and the internet enabled me to work from anywhere. I didn't have to be home. So I've been traveling the world with my wife and filing my stories from wherever it is I'm living. And it gives me the opportunity to live in fantastic cities like Kenya, which I've been here 2 months, and it's just a wonderful city. And I'm just lucky to be alive in an age when mobile technology enables me to live abroad and continue to work for publications in the United States.
Now, when you got there, is that when you first learned of M-Pesa?
Yeah, I'd never heard of it, actually, and I cover technology full-time. I got here and I was walking around and shocked to discover everybody's walking around paying for everything with their phones. In Silicon Valley, where I was based before, everybody's using credit cards, cash, things like that, and everybody's waiting for this big mobile wallet or digital payment revolution that hasn't come yet. And here in Kenya, it's already arrived. It's been here for years, and it works, and it's really a fantastic system.
So, Kentaro, how is it that he's right? This has been talked about in the United States for so long. We're waiting for it to come where I can buy something with my iPhone,
right,
and it just doesn't seem to materialize. And yet in Kenya, they've had this for years. That seems to reverse the normal technology model, no?
Yeah, I think it's incredible. I mean, basically what's happened in Kenya is that there's a new kind of technology that has really filled what is otherwise a large gap in all kinds of electronic, transaction systems. So in the United States, just like you said, we have credit cards, we have online banking, and so on. And so the need for something like that is just not as strong. In fact, I would say, I would guess if you introduce something like M-Pesa in the United States, that it wouldn't take off quite as much as it has in Kenya.
Oh, really? There kind of has to be the vacuum there that needs to be filled for this kind of service. It doesn't just work across the board.
That's right. I think there's been a latent demand for something like M-Pesa in Kenya for so long that when technologists put it there, it happened to fit the need very well.
This reminds me, I was in Iraq a few years ago, and there was a big problem with the Iraqi military going AWOL. They had huge numbers going AWOL, and the U.S. took it as if they weren't, they were just leaving their ranks. But what was happening is they were being paid in cash, and then they didn't have bank accounts. They had to drive home to their families in another part of the country, give them the cash, and often it would be too dangerous to come back, or they were just missing during that time to go home, give the cash, and come back. So you can really see in the world where they don't have electronic banking like in the U.S. that something like this would fill a bit of a gap.
The other thing I was going to say was that in Kenya there was a period of time when there was physical security itself was a problem. Like people were often getting mugged on the streets or in matatus, which are these buses. And so having a system like M-Pesa, again, prevented you from having to carry around cash. It was the perfect solution for that situation.
Right.
Our community is kind of saying those same things. Lots of people are tweeting in about why they prefer it. Pacific Aziz says this is the safest way to transfer cash to the remotest part of our country. Another tweet from Free Thinking Kenyan who says, the problem before was bureaucratic banking, charges, and money transfer timeframes. M-Pesa did away with it and empowered the populace from the ground up. Now, Omar Saif, speaking to us via satellite, I'd like to go to you on this because I know in Pakistan you've said that SMS, which is basically the technology that's behind things like this, is the Twitter of Pakistan. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. So Pakistan is the 9th largest market for cell phones in the world. It's also the 6th most populous country in the world. We have 123 million cell phones. So just about every household has a cell phone. And people largely communicate with each other using text messages. Pakistanis sent 253 billion SMSs last year. So it's sort of part of the fabric, part of the culture. And the SMS would be the equivalent of Twitter in a country like US. And I know this firsthand because I helped start a small company in the university I used to work in with a couple of students, which basically replicated a mailing list on SMS, where you could make a community over SMS and send an SMS that would go to the entire community. And from just a little service that I put together to coordinate my classes and quizzes in the absence of internet connectivity and uninterrupted power supply, because cell phones would just work all the time, it has now grown to sort of the Twitter of Pakistan, and it's used by about 5 million people. We send about 600 million SMS per month, and it's used by all sorts of people for all sorts of purposes, but most interestingly and most recently by all the political parties to rally their voters, especially for the upcoming elections. Just about all the large political parties now have their communities over this SMS service, ranging from 500,000 to about 3 to 4 million people. And they use them in innovative ways that we couldn't have anticipated when we were building the service. So I think sort of just having a simple service like Twitter or SMS could just about transform the way politics is done in a country like Pakistan. People connect
and
with
not just Pakistan, Umar. Jump across the border to India, and there's a service called Echo, which operates like M-Pesa. It doesn't have nearly as many subscribers, but the idea is similar. This is what Echo's co-founder said about the service in 2011.
Hi, good morning. I'm Abhishek Sinha from Echo. Let me tell you a story of a migrant worker by the name of Sanjay who works in Delhi. Sanjay has no place to keep his money safe, so he stitches his money to the inside of his shirt. And as and when he earns enough money, he walks up to the nearest bank branch, stands for long hours in the queue, loses his day's wage, and possibly even risks his job. My company Echo has partnered with 1,500 mom-and-pop stores, bringing basic banking and money transfer services to 1 million customers in India. And these human ATMs are empowered with basic phones such as these, which allow them to open bank accounts, do deposit, withdrawal, money transfer transactions, all in real time. There are absolutely no downloads, no internet, and no apps on this phone.
So I want to pose this to someone in our Google Hangout, Samujal Porkayasta, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, who is a researcher for technology and development. I'd like to get your thoughts on what you just heard and how we can integrate mobile banking with bank accounts. You might need to unmute your microphone. You're saying things, but we can't hear you. Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Hi, it's really a pleasure being here. I think one thing that I really wanted to talk about, like in India, banking regulations were actually very hard until as recent as last year. Phone companies like Safaricom in Kenya, in India, phone companies could not engage in banking transactions. So services like Echo would integrate with traditional banks like State Bank of India. I think that was Echo's partner. But until you had that bank account, you could not transact. So, but now that has changed. The Reserve Bank of India has allowed companies to act as business agents, which is a welcome effort. But I think the biggest problem of not having bank accounts in India is that big national schemes like the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which guarantees 100 days of employment or equal money, the money transaction never happens. The money doesn't get delivered to rural population because the rural population doesn't have bank accounts, or the alternate, which is post offices, do not exist. So my biggest concern is, will the government, like the central bank, come around and embrace mobile technologies and be in a position to say that this can replace the traditional banking system? Or will we see a position where mobile banking actually, at the end of the day, relates to the unbanked getting bank accounts? So mobile banking as a way to give people access to traditional banking. And we don't know yet because it's very nascent in India as against Kenya, which is much more ubiquitous thanks to M-Pesa and a very liberal banking regimen.
I'm curious if this is I would say a new movement in developing technology where once you realize everything a phone can do, now rather than coming up with the fastest, smartest phone, you're trying to do these smart things with the simplest bit of technology, because the world's greatest bit of population has phones like you have there on the table today, which, by the way, let's show this to our audience. We talked about it in the pre-show. This is vintage Nokia, 8 years ago. It's a real throwback. These things should be a collector's item. But, you know, if you can do all the things that you really need to do from a phone like that, you can access so many more people in the world, huh?
Right. So, you know, there's some things you obviously can't do. You can't surf the internet on a phone like this. But there are a lot of things that you can do, and I think that's what you're seeing with M-Pesa and so on. Particularly in parts of the developing world where smartphones have not penetrated as much as they have in the developed world, it's certainly the case that you can develop more services via SMS, via voice. And so, in fact, you know, I wouldn't even count out voice. There's a lot you can do just by having call centers where people pick up the phone and answer questions. And so on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, we were talking earlier, though, about how many things you really want your phone to do. I think initially there's a desire to have your phone do everything, right? So I can do my banking, I can change my home temperature, I can read a book, a movie. But what I realized, and we mentioned this in the pre-show, is that it's not just a convergence of these capabilities in my phone, it's a convergence of all these things in my life. And I think that becomes complicated in a sense. And I know that you've looked into this with your book.
So I would say, you know, with convergence, the question is really, you know, what parts of your life are you willing to do on your phone, and then are there other things that you don't want to do on your phone? You know, for example, I think the fact of, you know, larger tablets becoming very popular shows that there are a lot of things that you want to do with a much larger screen, and so on. So there are all these questions about, you know, what fits the niche. I don't think we'll ever see a day when we do everything with just one device or just one technology. But, you know, each thing will have its niche in the ecosystem.
Well, some of those same challenges that you guys just mentioned that our community is bringing up. Shitaki on Twitter says, I absolutely refuse to use SMS for money transactions. And he follows saying, there's little to no security on mobiles. Another tweet from David who says, mobile operators in Kenya are hiking, but the transaction fees are very expensive in remote areas. All just several challenges. I want to go now to our Google Plus Hangout to speak with Gishanye, who's a manager at an M-Pesa rival. Gishanye, go ahead. You might need to unmute your microphone.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, my name is Kishane. I am in Kenya. I'm a director at Gaza Money Transfer, the second largest mobile money company in Kenya. And well, generally, the rivals to M-Pesa to be, although M-Pesa is still a big giant, but we're getting in because of several challenges that we have experienced in the market by virtue of how M-Pesa is operated, being run by Safaricom, which is a virtual monopoly in Kenya as far as voice service is concerned. So what has happened is that, yes, we accept and we really appreciate the fact that M-Pesa broke into the money transfer business on mobile, which is a very good revolution. But at the same time, it has come with several consequences. By the fact that these guys are big, they have so many people registered, and there's been an issue of security. We have very many SIM cards that are not identified who has what, so it's been a home for fraud. And of course, also the monopoly, Safaricom is the most expensive service, but since we were all on it, then when the money service came in, we were tied to it. So what Tangaza did is came in as an integrator. It's available across all the mobile money services that are available in Kenya. There are 4 of them. And by being available on all mobile money services, we provided that opportunity to move out from the expensive one. And also the fraud part of it is that Tangaza uses biometric. It's biometric mobile money, whereby the security part of it, you got a photograph, you use a tablet, your own tablet, and therefore the security part of it, we have actually had no fraud for all that time that we've had. So we've worked very well, and we've gained our market share. And I think that's also something that...
well, speaking of market share, I want to get Mike in here, Mike in our Google Plus Hangout, because I want to know if this is a threat to other companies. There's a tweet from Mohammed Haddad who says, Kenya pioneered microfinancing in Africa. In other countries, though, tough banking regulations often hinders widespread adoption. And one more tweet from Peter who says, M-Pesa has been successful in Kenya and also in the Philippines. There's another system. Funny that the U.S. is so backward. Of course, big banks are against it. Is this a threat to big banks?
Well, it would be theoretically. Of course, banking regulations in a place like the United States are affected by the industries who currently make their money off of financial transactions, which includes a whole range of things. For example, M-Pesa is useful for many, many things. You can use it for a point of sale. You sit there and pay for things. You can pay your bills. You can send money to a friend or a relative. All of those different jobs in the United States are done by different types of companies. If you want to pay some individual in the U.S., you might use a service like PayPal. If you want to pay something at a point of sale, you might use a mobile wallet. A lot of people use their banking, their regular bank on an app on their phone to transfer money and do things like that. It's all mixed up, and there are lots and lots of companies that are making lots of money, and they don't want to give that up to a low-cost thing like M-Pesa. M-Pesa would be fantastic for consumers, but on the one hand, consumers don't really need it. We're using credit cards in the United States, and people are comfortable with it, that even though there are huge insecurity problems with credit cards. And on the other hand, you know, Kenya moved from cash to mobile banking, mobile transfers, and cash doesn't have a lobby. Cash doesn't have a vested interest in maintaining the use of cash. Whereas in the United States, you're talking about moving from these big, powerful credit card companies, banks, and by the way, companies like Apple and Google, billion-dollar companies who have a vested interest in making sure that people are not getting out of these like nickel and dime fees that Americans are currently charged. So it's a big uphill battle for something like M-Pesa in the U.S.
You know, I want to jump in here with a point that you raised, which is, you know, the real question is whether there's a real need and whether there's what kind of impact there is, right? And I would say the important thing is to separate 3 different kinds of impact. One is whether it's a successful business, and there's no doubt that M-Pesa is in Kenya. You know, it's made a lot of revenue for Safaricom. The second question is whether there's some redeemable social value in it for customers. And again, I would say M-Pesa certainly has demonstrated that social value, which is why customers love it so much. And then the third thing that often enters in these conversations is whether this is a technology that fundamentally addresses hard social challenges like poverty, injustice, corruption. And a lot of the great stories you hear about M-Pesa and M-Pesa-like projects is often that they are doing those things. But I would say the actual reality on the ground with the last claim is actually very thin. You know, in the end...
But wasn't there a World Bank report that said that people who had M-Pesa were more likely to have some sort of family savings with money as opposed to those who didn't?
There are some things like people tend to will save their money through M-Pesa and so on. But as somebody mentioned earlier, a lot of these systems exist already in the ecosystem, and M-Pesa is a slightly better way to do those things. So it's just like credit cards in the United States. On the one hand, they're incredible convenience. You don't have to carry a lot of cash around. You can buy a lot of stuff with it. Credit cards are probably one reason why M-Pesa will not take off in the same way in the United States.
I stopped carrying cash years ago.
Exactly.
All right, let's go to Cheyenne. I know that you wanted to get a question in here. Are you there?
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. I really wanted to talk, Kentaro briefly mentioned about voice being a potent technology for mobile banking in India, where literacy is a big problem. Even, just simple numbers in English. How does Kentaro envision voice playing a role, and what sort of technology innovations, or will it take for voice to take that role in countries like India or Pakistan, where literacy is a big problem? Thanks.
Thanks, Cheyenne. That's a great question. I actually want to kind of take the discussion away from the specific technology, whether it's voice or SMS or digital money, and actually talk a little bit more about how it's really important that if the goal is to address some serious social problem, that you can't just have the digital side of it. People will often say that technology is maybe 10% of the solution. So there's this remaining 90% that is social, political, economic. And if you don't address those things just as fervently as you do with the technology, ultimately, the hard challenges don't get solved.
What about in Pakistan? Do you have an issue with literacy there? You have about 22% of people have bank accounts. How is this going to impact it there?
So I presume that is directed at me.
It is directed at you. I apologize.
Okay. One of the experiments we've done recently with researchers from the Carnegie Mellon University was to try and invent something similar to what we did over SMS, over voice. We called the system Poly, and the system was simple, where people could call in, record a message, apply an entertaining manipulation or a sound effect to that sound, and then forward it to their friends. And we launched this on the Valentine's Day, and literally gave the number to 5 people to use. And in the last about 6 months, the system has now grown to about 85,000 users, and we've made more than 1 million phone calls for various people. And the idea was to pull people in.
That's an impressive growth in 6 months. And I tell you what, let's pick up the conversation there when we come back after the break. But first, let's turn to Malika with some other leads that we're following.
The killings of 3 Kurdish activists in Paris has set the Kurdish Twittersphere ablaze over what many are calling an execution. Netizens used the hashtag #TwitterKurds to circulate this image of the activists and discuss the killings. Meltem tweets, "I feel numb. Those bullets have penetrated each and every single one of us. Kurds are bleeding all over the world." One of the victims was a co-founder of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. Many speculated that the killings could derail peace talks, which Turkey recently began with the PKK. Killing the co-founder of the PKK is no path to peace, and whoever murdered these 3 knew it, tweets an anonymous account. Our next lead is from you, our online community, after you called for us to cover the hunger strike of Palestinian prisoner Samir Isawi. Isawi has been on hunger strike in an Israeli jail for nearly 170 days. He was released in a prisoner exchange in October 2011, but arrested again without charge months later. Activists recently held a 1-day global hunger strike in a show of support. Arij tweets, "Samir Isawi is in a battle for our own dignity. The least we can do is support him and other hunger strikers." And our last lead is from Japan, where police and a notorious hacker literally played a game of cat and mouse. The hacker Inkaku has evaded Japanese authorities for months, but last week Inkaku sent police a clue from the internet's favorite animal, a cat. The cat was set free, but authorities are still investigating the memory card on its collar. Well, we want to hear from you for more stories like these, so send us your pictures at facebook.com/AJStream. Josh?
I have 2 cats. One's named Mac and one is Tosh, so we always sort of Mac and Tosh running around the house. Yeah, it's all right. All right, well, thanks, Malika. Stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. On Monday, repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell may have allowed gays in the U.S. military to be more open, but did it give them equal rights? Until then, we'll see you online. Welcome back. This is the Post Show at stream.aljazeera.com. We're talking about a low-tech revolution and how mobile phones are helping communities transfer money in an easier way. Now let's get back to the discussion. So this is all working right now while those phones are predominant in the undeveloping world, but I know that these phones are becoming cheaper and cheaper, and at some point they will become the phone of choice in the undeveloped world. Does that affect a business model for a company like M-Pesa?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure how it will impact M-Pesa, but I would say that those phones are already in those markets. There's a second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand, fifth-hand, sixth-hand market for old phones. Even people who you might imagine can't afford or wouldn't want to afford phones like that are actually very excited to get them. They're kind of a mark of status and prestige.
Huh. That's interesting.
Well, we have a video comment here left by someone in Kenya. Kintara, I'd like you to have a listen to it and let me know what you think after.
This whole idea that people think as soon as you give a poor person a mobile phone, all of a sudden he gets money. Listen, poor people are poor for reasons that are beyond tech, all right? Social, economic, political. And so we need to just keep that in mind. A mobile revolution cannot happen if the bigger picture is not addressed, all right? So realize the limits of M-Pesa, which are definitely bigger than economy.
So he says it's bigger than the economy, and I think you would agree because you said something that, technology amplifies what's already on the ground.
That guy could write a plug for your book.
Yeah, in fact, I think I'll just let him write the book. No, that's exactly right. The technology amplifies underlying human forces. To the extent that those human forces want to eliminate poverty, that will happen. But to the extent that there are powerful forces that are not so concerned about eliminating poverty and just making money for themselves, that will also still happen through the technology.
Hey Mike, what does it seem like the penetration is there in Kenya for smartphones, and what's projected to happen with that in the coming years? And is that a threat to M-Pesa's business model?
Well, so far, from what I've observed, and my observation is unscientific to say the least, smartphone penetration is almost nil in Kenya, and in fact, it's surprisingly limited in Turkey and Greece and other places that I've visited since I left Silicon Valley. The world is going to be a combination of smartphones and dumb phones, for lack of a better term, for many, many years. And so any sort of solution that is exclusively for smartphones is going to fail in most of the world. In fact, when you're talking about mobile transactions and transactions in general, to this day, something like 85% of the world's transactions are still done in cash. 85%. Huge percentage of those, by the way, are in Japan, the United States, elsewhere. Everybody's still using cash. So there's a long, long way to go before we live in some utopia where everybody has a smartphone and is doing all their transactions using that smartphone.
Umar, are you still there? You were just telling us about a study conducted in Pakistan. Can you continue with that?
So this was a sort of a little experimental system we'd put together in the university as a joint project between LUMS, the university that I work in, and the Carnegie Mellon University. And it was a simple service where people could call in, record a little voice message, apply a voice manipulation, mostly with a view to sort of delivering a message to a friend with some degree of entertainment. So they could add some background music or something like that and forward it to a friend. And the goal was to sort of use entertainment as an incentive for low literate users to start using speech-based services. And we literally seeded the system with 5 users, and it has now grown to 85,000 people. We've made more than 1 million calls for various people. And we've started adding, circling back to what Kentaro said, sort of services with some social value. So when you call in, you could now forward a message to a friend, but there are also information or development payloads. These are additional prompts in the system. So you could call in also hear like a voice synthesized a version of a job posting that otherwise you can't read in a newspaper because you can't read. You can also sort of get awareness message about sanitation, cleanliness, about maternal health care, and so on and so forth. So I think this experiment sort of has convinced me that there's a lot of appetite for using technology. People can very quickly overcome barriers to using even push-based services, call trees and so on, which are otherwise difficult to navigate and understand. Just to be able to use services that provide them some value and some degree of entertainment.
Well, Mike, in our Hangout, I know that we've touched on this before, but I'm wondering your thoughts on whether or not this is transferable to places in the West, whether this could work in the U.S.
Absolutely, and one of the biggest movements that's happening in terms of technology and interacting with search and other services online, and this is going to come online very fast and it's going to be global, is the idea of artificial intelligence. And what's interesting about that is it's voice-based, and the processing for that intelligence is handled on a remote server. So, for example, if you can make a phone call, you'll be able to reach a computer system. Currently, you can tinker with this technology with something called Google Now or the Google Knowledge Base, also Apple's Siri technology for those who have smartphones. But in just 2 or 3 years, we're going to be looking at a world where you make a call, you talk to a computer in natural language, in any of dozens of languages, and simply tell it what you want. So say, I want to buy this, I want to send this to that person, and the system will handle that for you. So we're looking at just an unprecedented revolution. Post-literate, you don't have to be able to read, you don't have to have a smartphone, nothing. You just have to be able to speak in natural language, and you'll be able to do powerful things using these remote servers.
That sounds really cool. I'm actually looking forward to that, but I want to go now to our hangout. Gishayan, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, my question was, I came across this interesting thing before India deregulated its banking system last year, where people were using mobile phone balance. You know how you have prepaid phones, so you put some balance in your account as a way for monetary transactions. So people trying to sort of transfer money from one account to another. I think Airtel, which is one of the big players in India and in Africa now, after buying Zain, had this service where you could transfer 10 rupees worth of calling credit to a friend of yours, and people actually ended up using that as a way of monetary transaction. So I'm interested in hearing what the scene is in Kenya, and if anyone else, Umar and Kentaro and among our Google Hangout callers, have heard of things like these, and what do they feel about sort of the idea, and can that be formalized in some way for added security?
Mike, did you catch that?
So can I jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I want to do is, kind of deflate a little bit the hype around the technology doing a lot of things. Mm-hmm. In the United States, the rate of poverty went down until 1970 or so, and then has kept steady at about 13%, rising a little bit in the recent recession. Since 1970, we've had the internet, mobile phones, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, you name it, right? So the technology has exploded. Now, if you believe that the penetration of technology was the reason why poverty, for example, would get alleviated, then you would expect that there would be some dent in that 13%, right? But the fact that it hasn't suggests that you need something a lot more than the technology, even to have the kind of real social impact that you would actually want from something like a technology. In the United States, we've basically had the golden age of innovation, and that wasn't enough to create a dent in the United States' own backyard.
Well, I mean, the GDP went up with that, though, right?
Right.
So it does affect society, it does affect the economy, but perhaps it's not the cure to poverty.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is that the GDP went up, but as we know, a lot of it is the rich people getting richer, right? And so again, poverty is really a social, political, economic issue. It's if the human will to eliminate it isn't there, then the technology won't amplify that. There's no will there to amplify. And so basically what you get is the rich getting richer.
Wow. All right. So look, we're going to keep this conversation going on Twitter by using the hashtag AJStream. Go there, tweet about it. I'll join in the conversation. And then on Monday's show, we're looking at Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was dropped by the Pentagon, but did soldiers, gay soldiers particularly, get equal rights? We'll ask the question on Monday. And until then, we'll see you online.